Hey, good morning. I'm going to try without a mic. Yes, no? Perfect. So this morning, we have a brief amount of time, and we're going to talk about clarity. But I thought it might be best to start with how clarity plays out in our lives, not just in our classrooms, to kind of add some relevance to it. This was posted on a sports board New Year's Day in Virginia. Take a look. Now, but before you react in protest, within seconds, this post popped up. And so if anyone's concerned, clarity actually plays out in our lives. And so if later on today, if somebody were to ask you, what did you learn today, and you don't remember anything you picked up today, you can always say that you learned the difference between a cooker and so let's get started. We're going to talk about clarity and how it plays out in our classrooms. And so you may be able to picture in your mind a time when you said something in your classroom where you thought it was really well said. You thought your lesson was well constructed. You thought the day went very, very well. The students walk out of the door that afternoon, they come back the next day, and it's if they've never been inside a public school in their lifetime. Yes? So that's what we want to address. So if you would please just stand right up at your chairs for a moment. The research on clarity is pretty clear. It has the potential to double the rate of learning in our classrooms. The potential to do what?
Double the rate of learning in our classrooms.
Nice work. So turn to your neighbor and say, I want to double the rate. Now that doesn't mean double the volume. It doesn't mean we cover 2 chapters in one day, 6 chapters in 1 week. What it means is it affects the rate at which they acquire, consolidate, and store learning. And so that's what we want to focus on. For this next part, you are going to need your cell phones. Yep, I said it. Your mobile phones. You are going to need your mobile phones. If you don't have one, you can always steal one from a neighbor. Oh yeah, since there are no cell phones in the bathroom. If you would, make sure you've got a cell phone. If you don't have your mobile phone, that's fine. You will be partnered up in just a second. But here's what's going to happen. In about 10 seconds when I say go, you and your mobile phone will take 25 steps in any direction and find a new place to stand in the cafeteria. How many steps?
25.
What are you taking with you? Phone. Go. So you need 2 or 3 folks you can circle up with for just a moment. Find some folks you can hang out with. And when you do, this is what you're going to be looking for. If you cannot see the screen, you need the screen. Your first task is to look at your phone. You now have a set of instructions. You should be able to follow along with everything. Because we're in a cafeteria, I want you to be able to see the presentation. So everything that's on the screen is now going to show up on your phone. Your first task, though, is to respond to this question. So if you would, take a moment and respond using your phone directly into... So clear seems to be popular. There we go. Good. Punch him in. Punch him in. Take about 10 more seconds. It's gone again. Take about 10 more seconds.
Did you charge your batteries? Battery probably isn't charged.
All right. Pause right there. Pause right there. So tell me what you see on your phone. Do you see that slide? Excellent. So we've cut it off. Now let's talk about what we're going to do in the next short burst of time. We're actually going to talk about what clarity is. And at the end of our time together, there are going to be some success criteria that I'm going to ask you to unpack. In other words, did we meet these goals in this short burst of time? You have those success criteria right in front of you. And so we're going to describe what it's meant, explain the role, and then you're going to be able to design some practices. Now that one will carry over into our smaller group sessions, so don't panic if we don't get there yet. But one of the ways I want you to think about clarity is an earthquake. So the beauty of this is we can think about what we do in our schools and classrooms as earthquakes. There are things that we do in our schools and classrooms that have almost no measurable impact, but we may spend a lot of time doing it. Those things go on the de-implementation block. There are earthquakes that, did students make some gains? Maybe, but they're so small they're not noticeable gains. Then there are those medium earthquakes, and these are the earthquakes where they make an impact, but they're very isolated. For example, it works in that room, but it doesn't work in that room. Or it works with those students and it doesn't work with those students. Those are medium earthquakes. They're measurable, but they're not a universal impact. And then there are those big, big, big things that we do in our schools and classrooms where the students are measurably and noticeably different walking out of our classrooms than when they walked through the door to come in there. In other words, you see it, you hear it, you can watch it happen in your classroom. Oddly enough, clarity can be related to an earthquake. Now I want you to vote on this. What type of earthquake is clarity? You should now get a chance to vote on this. Where is that? Is it a little earthquake, a medium-sized earthquake, or is it a rattle the windows and change the shape of the building earthquake? Take a moment and vote. Excellent. It turns out that clarity doubles the rate of learning. If clarity exists in our classrooms, it doubles the rate of learning. So what does that mean? It means if a student experiences growth of 4/10 of a standard deviation, which is 1 year, when we have clarity in our classrooms, our hallways, our schools, the rate actually doubles. Turn to your neighbor and say, the rate doubles. And so what we want to park on today is exactly what that doubling looks like. So take about 2 minutes. You don't need your phones for this next part. This is just a conversation with your neighbors. What does clarity look like right now in your classroom? Tell somebody close by, what does clarity look like right now in your classroom? You have 2 minutes. Go. Pause for just a second. Pause right there. Don't go anywhere just yet, but say thank you to your neighbors. So I want to share with you the 3 big ideas that come with clarity. I want to give you some specific examples, and then we will work on the rest of this in small groups. So before you go back to your original seats, please once again say thank you to your neighbors and head back to your original seats. Yep. Pause right there. What's that? Thank you. All right. Your phone is going to have all of this on there. So you can follow along in the back because that's where we like to sit.
John,
Yeah, go ahead.
I got a quick question.
Go ahead.
Can you put this word in your parking lot for both some conversation maybe later today?
Okay.
But also just to have the parking lot and all of y'all do it too. The word of the day is de-implementation.
Oh. De-implementation. We're going to get, that's going to have to come up. So de-implementation is going to have to come up. So we can put that there. So let me give you 3 big ideas, and then we'll come back to that word. Here's why clarity matters. How many of you, by a show of hands, have been asked to do something, and you can raise your hands because I'm the one on video, not you, so you're okay. How many of you have been asked to do something in your schools or classrooms where you had no idea why you were being asked to do it, you didn't actually know what it was all about, and you had no idea what it was going to look like when it was finished? Now, and the camera's still on me, so you're safe. You probably don't want to raise your hands, but let everybody else. How did you feel about that thing? Anxious, overwhelmed. Come on. Unmotivated. Confused. Agitated, right? How much effort did you really put into it? Maybe only when someone was looking? Now I want you to think for a minute. Everyone in this room is 30 years old. And you just reported your feelings. Now think about your own classroom. What happens if you're 12 and you have no idea what's being asked of you, why you're being asked to do it, and have no idea what it looks like when it's finished? That's the feeling I want us to sit in for a minute as to why clarity matters. It's more than just something on the board. It's more than just another thing for a walkthrough. It actually helps lower anxiety. It helps lower challenges with behavior and management because the students begin to understand what it is they're supposed to do because clarity defines the learning. So the first big idea is clarity actually defines the learning for the student, but the process of clarity allows us to define it for ourselves. Sometimes I teach things I have no idea why I'm teaching them. And it makes me go, wait a second. If I don't know why, there's no way the hungover 21-year-old in the second row knows. Now, I know your situation's a little different than my undergrads, but you get the drift. Here's the second big idea. Oh, we're having all kinds of technology challenges here. No, it's not working at all. Yeah, I don't know what it's doing.
John, where's your tech guy? Oh yeah, that's you, John.
Yeah, where every tech guy is. Hold on. I don't know what it's doing. Here we go. It's not responding at all. Hang tight. It just told me something went wrong. Yeah, but it's something internet locked up on me. Yeah. All right, so we're just going to do it this way. Here's the second thing clarity does. Clarity helps us make decisions. Let me give you an example. Let's say today you want your students to analyze a poem. The verb there is what? So it actually helps me decide which strategies I go to and which strategies I outright avoid. Because if I know I want them to analyze a poem, then now I need to focus on what? Strategies that actually engage them in the analysis of the poem so I can stay away from other strategies. For example, I'm not going to want to use a jigsaw. I'm not going to want to use reciprocal teaching, but I may want to use another cooperative learning structure. Let's say I want them to illustrate photosynthesis. I'm going to stay away from certain strategies, but I'm going to go towards other strategies because I know I want them to illustrate. So in many ways, it helps us make decisions about what to do and avoid things that are not going to contribute to that learning. It allows us to de-implement something for the day. Because all you hear when you're in conferences or at conferences are all these HLPs, high leverage practices, evidence-based practices. They're just coming out. So you're often overwhelmed. I am overwhelmed when I decide, well, what am I going to do today with my 6th grade math students? Well, here are all these strategies I'm supposed to use. Now I'm overwhelmed, and so I just randomly select one. Versus if I look at my success criteria and I know exactly what I'm supposed to do, then I know which one to go pick. So the learning moves from chance to design. So students are no longer learning by chance, they're learning by design, all because clarity improves my decisions. Last and certainly not least, it improves the ability for students to self-regulate. Because if a student knows what, why, and how, then they are able to actually engage in the process with you because they have a stake in the game. They have skin in the game, so to speak. So you have 3 major ideas. The first one is clarity defines the learning. Turn to your neighbor and say, clarity defines the learning.
Clarity defines the learning.
Second idea, clarity helps me make decisions. Turn to your neighbor and say, it helps me make decisions. The third idea is It helps promote self-regulated learners. Turn to your neighbor and say, I want self-regulated learners. Here's what I want you to do. With your neighbors, take a moment and review those 3 big ideas. You're going to need them in just a second. Talk it out. Go. Say thank you to your neighbors. So let's take this to the next level. Let's take this to the next level. We want to move through a couple of these together. And I want to show you how this plays out and kind of unpack what this might look like. And then, of course, in the smaller groups, we'll dive in deeper. I do want you to take a vote, though. This is one of my favorite polls. Do you see this on your screen? Are we back? Okay. Some of you may be sitting there going, you know what? The bow tie's cute and all, but I'm not buying this bull even if it were on sale. Some of you might be going, okay, you know what? I'm kind of okay with where we are right now. I need you to vote for a second so I get a feel for how tough the crowd is. Okay, so that's promising. So no one's ready to throw in the towel yet, at least from the 40-plus folks that have responded. And so remember, this has the potential to double the rate of learning. I say potential because one of the challenges we have in education is we're often presented research as if it were a guarantee. It drives me crazy. It drives me crazy. Typically, they're from textbook companies. Yeah, I said it. If you do this, your kids will read. If you do this, your math scores will do that. Time out, no one can tell you that. No one can make that promise. What they can say is, look, the research says this gives us a higher potential of accelerating the learning. The difference is the potential becomes a practice, the intention becomes implementation, the research becomes reality when you make adjustments based on who's in front of you and your context. And so some of the conversation we're going to have today is, how does this look in my classroom? Because your students may need it repeated 5 and 6 times, but yours don't. So it's going to look different in these 2 classrooms, and that's okay. Because effect sizes are potentials, not guarantees. And so let's talk about how it defines the learning. How it defines the learning. One of the ways that it does this is it allows students and teachers to answer 3 very important questions, and I want to share those questions with you right now. This definition is an interaction. So for example, as a teacher, I have to walk in the room every day and be able to answer these 3 questions. And these are non-negotiable. What is it that I want my students to? Turn to your neighbor and say, learn, not do.
Learn, not do.
It's not about an agenda. It's not about a list of tasks. It's learning. Today we are learning about subject-verb agreement. Today we are learning about photosynthesis. Today we are learning about author's purpose. Today we are learning about horizon lines. Today we are learning about overhand throwing. What's the concept, the idea? But then we have to be able to justify it. And because the state of Pennsylvania said so, may be a correct answer, but it's not an appropriate answer. Instead, it falls on a continuum. It falls on a continuum. I want you to do this with me. Hold your hands out just like this. Here's the continuum. It really goes from left to right. So over here on the far left, this part of the continuum, it's because it's going to help you do something later. Today I'm learning about author's purpose so I can better understand what I'm going to read. There's the why. Today I'm learning about the horizon line in art because I'm going to have to construct a still life and show perspective. Today I'm learning about trig identities. I have no idea why we have to learn trig identities. And I'm a math major. Math major, taught trig. Have friends that are engineers. The computer does it. Nobody cares. But we have to do it anyway. So yay. Yay us. Trig identities. So sometimes it's utility. Turn to your neighbor and say, sometimes it's utility. Because I'm going to use it in just a second. But there are these magical moments all the way over here on the right side. These are magical moments where what we're doing in class actually relates to their life. Now, these moments are few and far between. The research bears that out. In K-12 world, it's often not clear. And even if it was, they're 12. They're worried about lunch or dressing out in PE. They're not worried about wiring a house. So we don't want to miss those moments. Turn to your neighbor and say, don't miss those moments. But don't get hung up on it and lie to them either. It's okay for it to be utility. Turn to your neighbor and say, it's all right for utility. So don't focus so much on how do I make this relevant to their life. Instead, how do I make this relevant right now? There's some cool research that's come out of cognitive science. You're going to love it. Dan Willingham reports on it from the University of Virginia. It turns out when we take learning and align it with students' passions, the learning goes down. Okay. Thank you for, I appreciate the dramatic response. Let me say that again. If I take learning and align it to students' passion, the evidence says learning goes down. I know. Here's why. Let's say I'm teaching fluid dynamics or fluids, right? Let's say I'm teaching pressure and volume, and I want to relate it to a car. Or let's say I'm talking about nitrates and the nitrogen cycle, and I weave that into the farm. If the student is passionate about it, what are they going to think about? The thing or the learning? Come on, you know what they're going to think about. If I relate it to Minecraft, what's going to happen the minute I relate it to Minecraft? And what are they not going to be talking about and thinking about? You got it. So it turns out it actually causes a problem because they want to think more about Minecraft and less about whatever you're trying to peddle and convince them is like Minecraft. That shocked me too. So it's okay if it's related to Minecraft, just be careful. Just be careful. Oh, by the way, students have to answer these questions too. What am I learning? Why am I learning? And how will I know when I've learned it? All right, back to your Mentimeter. Of those three questions, where do your students thrive and where maybe do they not thrive? Which of these three clarity questions is most evident in your classroom? Which ones do they crush? I mean, they just crush it. They get this one.
I'm an art teacher. When kids are passionate about art, they do it a lot. They don't think they know it. So it's very hard to get them to
Absolutely.
pick up new skills.
Yep, absolutely. All right, so here's what we've got. So far, it's bearing out that, number one, what am I learning? They tend to crush that. By the way, that's what we see across the globe. Most kids can muster up a response to tell you what it is. Now, it may be them doing this. Math. So at least they know what room they're in. And for middle schoolers, that's a win. That's a win. They're my favorite age. Sixth graders are my favorite. When I get close to retirement, I will finish out my career in a sixth grade science classroom. Because they're just, it's just magical. They don't have any idea how to survive in the real world. And they still think you're kind of cool. And so there's this nice blend of a reality. Eighth graders, there's a reason they're 1 year away from being kicked into a different building. But sixth graders, they're just wonderful. They can tell you what. This is what we're seeing across the globe as well. Most don't know why, but if they like you, they're game. Which is not so good because teacher-student dependency has an effect side of negative 0.26. So while it's flattering that they do it because of me or you or them, that's fine. Just keep in mind if that continues and the only reason they're going to do this particular task is because of me, in the long run that's harmful. Negative 0.26. The one they absolutely struggle with is what success looks like. Because success is often dependent upon what? Grades, and one more thing, where the teacher tells me I can stop. I interviewed a kindergartner one time, and the little fellow was sitting there at the table, and he was coloring, and he was working on the number 13. Now, I know this is a middle school, but hang with me. So he's sitting there, and he's working with his little crayons, and he's working on the number 13. And so I walk over, and I said, "Hey, buddy, can I ask you some questions?" "Yeah." I said, what are you learning today?" And he slams the crayon down, he looks, he said, "Look, mister, I'm just trying to get this done so I can go outside." And I said, "Well, how do you know you've learned it?" He said, "When she tells me I can go outside." The point being is we don't always do well here. So clarity, the work on clarity, for us, the hardest part is now making sure they know what success looks like, and it can't be dependent upon when I tell them. It can't be dependent upon when I tell them. It's when they recognize that they've met the success criteria. So in our small groups, we'll start looking at how we can convey that in a way that works, and then build in support so that if they have to go back to it 90 times, they can, but they can answer all three of those questions. That's what gives us the 0.84. The 0.84. So as we close out our time, I want you to take just a moment with your neighbors and start to kind of goal set. So what might be something you want to grab a hold of today, know more about today? What is something you might want to ask about? Start generating some questions, some concerns with your neighbors. You have about 2 minutes, and then I'm going to stop, and we'll be on to our next task for the day. So with your neighbors, process and predict. Talk it out. Go. All right. Pause right there. Pause right there. Pause right there. So we have reached the end of our time this morning. And so from here, we will break into our group sessions, but I want to make sure that we've laid the cement, right? And right now it actually may be wet cement. So you may be thinking, I have no idea what this is going to happen next. In that case, then I probably lacked clarity, and we have an issue whether it's a cooker. And so that's going to stay in your minds forever. It stayed in mine forever. But hopefully we've laid some cement, even if it's wet cement. The idea that clarity has the potential to what with the rate of learning? It has the potential to double the rate of learning, which is good news for me. But clarity also defines the learning for us. It helps me make decisions, which allows me to push some things aside. I may be doing something in my school day during a 7th period, 5th period, 4th period, whatever block you're in, that clarity actually tells me, you know what? I think I can let that go. So it's decisions and defining, but it also gets our learners involved. And it gets them involved because we want them to answer 3 questions. What are those 3 questions? What am I learning? Why am I learning it? How will I know I've got it? In our small group in here, we're going to talk about how to fine-tune and communicate that to learners in a way that sticks. In your other group, you'll talk about how we can communicate cognitive complexity so that we raise that rigor. So before I hand it off, turn to your neighbors and say, thanks for a great start to the morning. It's all yours.